So what are some of the different live sound systems you might come across? Well, there's different combinations. In this case, we've got a powered mixer with unpowered speakers. So we've got 4 channels. We can see XLR inputs here, RCA inputs for tape playbacks, probably some 2 tonal controls and a volume control, probably no built-in effects, probably pretty basic for something like a church. Here's an unpowered mixer with powered speakers. Now these speakers need to be plugged in. We've got 4 XLR inputs, comes with this wireless microphone, and then we've got line cables to go out of the mixer to the powered speakers. And then these would have AC cables that would plug into the wall. Might be a combination. So in this case, we've got unpowered mains and a powered mixer, but we could also run an amplifier to unpowered monitors. So that's a combination you might see. That's probably pretty typical for like a rock band setup. When we're thinking about speakers, let's also talk about crossovers. This is mentioned before, but it's good to go over again. So crossovers are going to take the incoming signal and separate it into different frequency bands. So specific frequency bands will go to specific drivers. And this allows us to get that speaker to be most efficient, give it the range of frequencies that it can handle without hurting it, and then also lets us use different amplifiers as we separate the signal. Passive crossovers are usually found inside speaker cabinets, and they're not adjustable to the user, where active crossovers are going to be outboard processing, and generally the user can then make adjustments of where that's going to be. So in a speaker, we'd have a single cable coming into the speaker, and then the passive crossover inside the speaker cabinet would then divide the signal up, and high frequencies would go to the tweeter and low frequencies would go to the woofer. If we have an active crossover, then you can see we're looking at the back of the rack mount here. We have a single input coming onto this channel, and then we've got various different configurations. But for our two-way, we would use the highs would go to the high frequency amp, and the lows would be the low frequency amp. And you can see what's happening is very, very steep high pass and low pass filters. So only the low end is coming out of this signal. And we would define what frequency range is defined as low because it is an active, and we can set that. And then these signals would then go to the responsive power amplifiers. So looking at the whole system, we'd have our mixer going into an active crossover. We've separated the highs and lows. We're going to send the highs. In this case, we're going to say 150 hertz and above is going to go to our full range amp. And that will go then to our full range cabinet with the passive crossover taking 150 to maybe 2K to the low and then 2K and above to the high tweeter. Meanwhile, 150 hertz and below is going to then our amp that's just for our lows here, and then we'll go to our subwoofer cabinet. So only 150 hertz and below is coming out of here. It was what requires the most energy, so this amp was much more powerful, fill as much of the room with low end as we think is desirable, while not make everyone deaf trying to pump dance-worthy sub-low end out of the speaker, which it's just not capable of doing. On a tri-amped system, you can see here, we then go low, mids, and highs, and we'd send each of those to its own amplifier. Lows would go to the low frequency driver, mids would go to the mid driver, and then highs would go to the high frequency driver. Generally pretty small amp, and then a medium-sized amp, and then a huge amp for the lows. One of the things we also want to think about is avoiding damage. So when we're talking about amplifiers and speakers, we want to make sure that amplifiers should be turned on last. Everything else gets turned on, and then the amp rack gets turned on. And when we're done with the gig, the inverse is true. The amplifiers are turned off first, and then everything else is powered down and unplugged. By doing this, you'll avoid any kind of amplified pops, power surges, anything going through the speakers. So it's really important that amplifiers are turned on last and turned off first. Great. That's a look at some of the new things that we've talked about with live sound. I hope you found that interesting.